She's more important than us.
Yes.
Ready.
You ready? Okay, I'm going to call the meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Chair Campetti,
Here.
Vice Chair Schroth,
Here.
Board Member Breckville,
Here.
Board Member Lewis, Board Member McChrystal.
Here.
Board Member Moser. Here. Board Member Noble.
Here.
Okay. Mr. Attorney, do you want to swear in our member? That's you.
Do I need to go down there? You can stand.
Okay.
Just do it from right there. Yeah, everybody has to do it.
Everyone now?
Yes.
Okay. So you want us all to stand?
Yeah, everybody can stand, and I'll ask you to raise your right hand.
I will just need you to sign up after you take the oath.
Everybody raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name. Am qualified under the Constitution, laws of Florida,
Qualified under the Constitution, laws of Florida,
and the Code of Ordinances for the City of Stuart, Florida,
and the Code of Ordinances for the City of Stuart, Florida,
to serve as a member of the Community Redevelopment Board,
to serve as a member of the Community Redevelopment Board,
and that I will well and faithfully perform
and that I will well and faithfully perform
the duties of an advisory board member on which I am about to enter, so help me God.
the duties of an advisory board member on which I'm about to enter, so help me God.
All right, you may be seated.
Okay. We all need to sign this and give it back to Sue.
Stealing somebody's pen.
Yeah, well, somebody stole
You
it.
don't have a pen?
Okay,
Doesn't work very well if you need
Anybody else need a pen?
I have it. Here you go.
Do you mind if I borrow this just for the meeting?
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, we are now ready for the annual board reorganization, selection of a chair and vice chair. I'll take nominations for chair.
I'd like to nominate Thomas Campenny for chair.
Do we need seconds on that?
Yes. Yes.
Okay,
I'll second. Go ahead. Bonnie gets it.
okay, any other nominations? I close nominations for chair, and I guess I'm the chair again. Thank you very much, board members. Selection of a vice chair. Can I get a motion? Nick is our current vice chair.
I'll make a motion to make Bonnie the vice chair.
I think Bonnie may
I'm
be.
going to be on leave
gonna be out
Oh,
of
okay.
town.
Makes sense.
for at least a month, so. Pass
There's only
this.
one person eligible, that's Nick, right?
Well, anyone is eligible, so if you want to nominate Nick, I think you should nominate Nick.
I'd like to nominate Nick, is it Schroth?
Schroth.
Schroth for vice chair.
Seconded by Andy. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, so
Appreciate it, board.
we once again have our same officers. Thank you very much. Okay, can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Can I get a second?
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Passes unanimously. Approval of the minutes of the December 5th CRB meeting. Can I get a motion to approve?
So moved.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Moved by Mark, seconded by Andy. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, there was no money in that, was there? Okay. All right, comments from the public? Seeing none, comments by board members?
Sure, why not?
Go ahead, Frank.
I don't think I have that agenda copy.
Here you go.
Or maybe, you know what, maybe it's on the original thing I printed out, possibly.
You know what? It's very light today, Andy.
Okay, good.
Okay, go ahead, Frank, while we're waiting.
I would like to know exactly what kind of roles we're supposed to play, what kind of powers we have. For instance, there was a agenda item last night that was well attended. And I noticed again something that really irritates me about the code that allows what I consider to be eye candy or great benefit for the developer in their efforts to produce what we like to call blivets now. A blivet is defined as 200 pounds of horse manure in a 100-pound bag. So, and the best example I'm talking about, and it has to do with the landscaping code. And the best example, well, I'll tell you what it is for. It's basically, and I don't know the technical names for it or anything about it, other than I know this. There's a measurement of each trunk of a tree that you take off a piece of land. They measure the circumference of it. And every tree they take down, they have to replace the exact circumference of tree somewhere. Now, what ends up happening is they take that volume or number of inches or whatever you want to call it of tree, okay, and they end up packing that number into about a third or less of the land needed for those type of trees to live and grow in a healthy manner. And 4 or 5 years down the road, you're left with a big bunch of nothing. And it benefits the developer because what they use it as is something to really block the development in the early stages from the street. And look at us, look at us, look at all this good stuff we're doing, okay? The best example of why it's a bad idea that I've seen is when you go, if you take a left and go into Aldi's, and then you take a right and head to Walmart, whatever those apartments are right there, is a prime example. They took beaucoup amounts of trees, and half of them are gone already, and they planted them all real close together, so the trees end up fighting each other for sunlight and food and water. And even worse there is they put every type of tree possible right next to the swale, and half of those died because they're not going to live in water. So I think it's an abuse of the landscape code. I'm just wondering where does the process start changing stuff like that?
Frank?
Where does it start?
Can I make a suggestion?
Yes.
Perhaps like we have Nancy here because Mark wanted to have a little lesson on public art. I think, we could have Pennell and Lee get together and then give us a little class on what a board member can and cannot do, and what they can change and not change, and how they could change, or we're an advisory board, so we can only recommend changes.
Right.
So, but I think it would serve us well, since we have some new board members, even though you're not really a new board member, and Mark isn't any longer, and Bonnie isn't. It's still only a year. So perhaps we could have Andy and Pennell set something up the next meeting or two to give us a primer on what our responsibilities are and what it all means. You do an excellent job on that one piece about sunshine and boards, but I think we need something a little bit more encompassing about responsibilities also, about what, I'm with you, Frank, because last night I heard people say, well, we don't care. We just want it not to be approved. And that you can't do either.
Right.
So we do have some responsibilities, and I
Well, and
think,
if I could just share some real-world experience with what Frank's talking about. So in St. Lucie County, Islamorada Beer Company bought a 50,000 square foot warehouse that had been built in 2007, and we bought it in 2016. So, we inherited this site, and they put a bunch of cabbage palms up against the building and, created problems, and we cut them down unbeknownst to us that they were part of our landscaping and our tree mitigation. Well, when I went back and researched it, the tree mitigation requirement was that we plant 250 or so, breast height inches of tree to mitigate for the 100 or so inches of trees that were removed from the site. So I had a tree survey, I had a surveyor go out there and do a survey, and we had 950 inches of trees on that site at that, currently, because we took a bunch of, we took 4 or 5, 8, 10, 12-inch oak trees and replaced it with 50, 2.5 or 100 2.5-inch trees. So a 2.5-inch tree is going to grow at a much higher rate than your, old oak tree. And so, here we are 10 years after the building's been built, and, we had 900 inches of trees on the site, and so like, there's got to be a balance, or there should be a way in the code to say like, hey, this, like, we're going to memorialize this as your tree mitigation, and like at some point in the future, like, if you need to remove something or add something, you need to show where the inches are still, are still there, and you're still maintaining it. And it might mean that like where you planted 3 trees, the one that survived wins, and now there's only 1 tree there because it gives it the the inches that you're trying to replace.
So then, we may need 2 things. One is an overall survey, one meeting, and 2, maybe to look at the CRA's landscaping code, if we can do that. And I really would like to first concentrate on the code we have around here, not go to East Stewart, which we just finished, or the Creek District, but to do one we haven't looked at.
Well, and when it comes to
recently.
landscaping, you might find that it's just part of the general code, and
Well, is it?
yeah.
Is it
so
part
Chris
of your
is back
general
there
code?
nodding his head, so it may end up being a citywide thing, but, I mean, that's the struggle that I've personally run into, and Frank, like, I hear
Can-
what you're saying, because, you go out there, you plant all these trees, not all of them are gonna survive, but if at the beginning, if the pre-development scenario had 120 inches of trees, and the 20 years down the road has 900 inches of trees, I'd say you've done some public good there, you've accomplished quite a bit. It's the counting and the accounting of that is probably a mechanism the code needs to account for, because at some point down the road, Tidewater, or whatever that project is there by the Meritage deal there behind Aldi, at some point, someone's gonna go out there and issue a code violation because you're not in compliance with your landscape plan anymore, and someone's gonna have to go and figure out, like, all right, well, this oak tree that we planted as 2.5 inches is now 8 inches, what do we do? But the
Aren't you
landscape
glad you're not
plan's
code
gonna
enforcement?
govern and say you gotta plant 2 more oak trees here, and,
So that project you're talking about where you put the 900 inches in it, did you do that? Did you pack it all into a smaller
no, we
space?
didn't build it, we just, we
Okay.
bought it
Oh, all right,
after the
okay.
fact. But the way these landscape codes read is it's very much like a snapshot of time, and it doesn't account for the fact that these 2.5-inch trees that you're planting are growing at a much higher rate or a much faster rate than the trees that you're removing. So-
Mr. Chair? Oh, I'm sorry, Nick. I wanted to comment on that, on just asking if, when we discuss what Frank's talking about, can we also discuss the penalties for not doing it? Because we experienced that here in our city, where the developer just tore down the trees, and then there wasn't enough space for them to put them back, basically, and we had no leverage. Then we had nothing. And I mean, you should suffer something when the city says, this is code, you got to file it, and you just strip the
Okay, so that's
But
all-
anyway,
Thanks for the time. Let's move on.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So if we can, if the attorney and Pennell believes that we have the authorization, now we're talking about a citywide code, but we should understand the code we're trying to,
I think the context in
enforce.
which Frank's trying to do this, or wants to see this, is when projects are presented to us, what is the level of critique that we
can
are
give.
afforded? And, like last night, as people pile on and say, hey, 4 stories is out of context and ridiculous and crazy, and, Frank, you're on the opposite side of this coin as me, but I appreciate the candid dialogue. I mean, if we're not going to approve four-story projects because they're 4 stories, let's just go out there and eat the bullet and pay everybody their Bert Harris claims and say that the height limit's 2 stories.
Again, I want to bring this back so we can bring Nancy up, because Nancy's got other things she needs to take care of after this meeting, if you
Can I
don't mind.
just make
Sure.
one comment? If we do get someone to come in, we don't have a city landscape architect, is that correct?
No.
I would
It would just
wonder
be the
if,
development department.
okay, yeah, I would wonder if you would be able to provide somebody that, because there are strategies of why you do these things if you're a landscape architect, and I think that would be helpful if that's what we want to know.
Chris, do you want to,
We do have
you want to introduce yourself?
yes, sorry,
for the record?
Chris McCrane, Principal Planner for the record. We have a environmental consultant that we might be able to call
Okay.
to see if they have somebody that's knowledgeable in that.
Okay, again, I just want to give Pennell and Lee, because they have to go back to the city manager and see what is possible to do for us. Lee, you want to add something?
Just briefly, again, Lee Baggett, City Attorney for the record. Currently, the CRB does have bylaws. I don't know if you've looked at them. We've kind of discussed them lately, myself, City Clerk, and the City Manager, because they're not posted on the website. So we're trying to figure out a way of, the advisory boards, not just your board, but all of them, where can we find them? Where can they be easily located? So we're trying to find a way of be able to post them on the website, but we're also thinking of incorporating them in the code, so that which is already online. You can and find online by searching, but you can't search and find the bylaws. So the way it's set up currently, the bylaws do spell out the duties and responsibilities, which I have a copy here I can give to you after the meeting. You've never seen them.
I think sometimes it's better to give us a verbal presentation.
Right, and I plan on it, but in the meantime, before that, if you needed to. I also wanted to point out that section 8.00.04 of the Land Development Code for City of Stewart does also spell out the duties and responsibilities of the board here, just so you know.
Thank you, Lee.
Yep.
Thanks.
Okay, so everyone has what we want, the 2 things, and after you speak to Mike, you can let us know and schedule something. Anybody else has any other comments not related to the meeting?
The only other comment the comment I had is, I apologize, I didn't get through the agenda as much as I'd like in all the packet, but Lee mentioned the bylaws, and in looking through some of that as it was sent out, it appears that we're not actually functioning in some degree with those bylaws, and so it might be a good idea to just look through those and see if we need to change something here, or if the bylaws have changed or need to change.
Lee, did we change our own bylaws?
No,
Or does it
you
go
might-
through-
I'll have to look to whether or not you could recommend changes, but ultimately, the city commission will do that. In fact, just to point out, in the meetings that the city manager, the city clerk, and myself have had, we've had probably 3 or 4 meetings on the bylaws for the advisory boards, and we are in the process of updating and organizing them better. Like we were saying, you can't find anything, so we're trying to centralize everything, probably maybe even in the code of ordinances, so that everything's in one spot for all the advisory boards, their bylaws, in the code, so it'll be easily be able to find it, and consistency. So we're working on that now.
Okay.
So we might be amending the bylaws here this year. So
Okay.
we're in the process of that.
So, Mary, just for Mark and all, can we get a could you just send us a copy of the bylaws?
Yes, definitely. Mary Kendall for the record, City Clerk. Like Lee mentioned, we're going through them all. From my understanding, they can go before the board for you to review and make recommendations, but like he said, the city commission ultimately
Yeah, I always thought it would
approves the
come
final.
before us and then
Yes.
up to the commission after it came
We're just
before us.
working on this, kind of implementing it more into the code side of it and reducing kind of all of the detail in the bylaws and making them a little more specific and consistent with each of the other boards.
Okay.
So we can do that.
All right. Anything else? All right, seeing nothing else. Nancy, you are up. No, I'm sorry.
I'll let Nancy go on with the presentation, but I just want to remind the board that at the end of the presentation, we want to discuss the criteria that's in the Land Development Code that we use to evaluate public art projects. So keep that in mind. She does have those criteria in her presentation. We want direction from the board as far as what you expect to see from the private developers, so we can convey that message to the developers. Nancy?
Bring that microphone way down. Not as tall as Lee. So my name, Nancy Turrell, Executive Director, CEO of Martin Arts, which is the umbrella for two nonprofit organizations in our community, the Arts Foundation for Martin County and the Arts Council. The Arts Council is Martin County's local arts agency, and we are here to inspire and encourage participation and passion for the arts in our community. We do that in a variety of ways. Most of you know that we are housed in the county's Courthouse Cultural Center on East Ocean Boulevard next to the gazebo. We offer exhibitions in that space. We, in fact, at 5:30 tonight, have a concert. And do other things like Arts Fest and the Martin Arts Awards to encourage the community to be engaged in and involved with the arts. I have been the executive director for nearly 25 years, which is hard to believe, but it has been that long. So with no further ado, and I just, as way of background, we were advocates for when the county established their public art ordinance, which is still in place also. The county's program is very different than this program. The county's program is based on county expenditures and putting public art on county properties, whereas this is in the CRA with private developers, unless they choose to contribute to the fund. So there are some differences in the two programs we have in the community. The first two slides I have really are a little philosophical about what public art is and why communities such as the city of Stuart would choose to create a public art program in the community and ask that developers participate. There's a variety of motivations to do public art in a community like this. A lot of it is because you're trying to foster that community pride and make people who visit our community understand some things about who we think we are as kind of a people. And I've flipped my second side because, again, these are kind of philosophical. I'm not reading from them. But public art, to me, is a very visible symbol to our visitors in our community about what's important to us. And I think we probably would all quickly raise our hands and say, if you look at the public art in our community, what's important to us? Our environment and our sea life and creatures. But there are programs, and I have a couple examples later in this presentation. You know, public art programs range from the very tangible things like sculptures out to the more theoretical and supporting programs like we already have in the city of Stuart, like Rocking River Walk and the other arts events like our event, Arts Fest, coming up. They do support programs in some cases. I think sometimes it's easier to talk about what is unsuccessful even than what is successful. And to me, the two big things that can go wrong with a public art effort, one is just that sort of general lack of specificity. Things are too broad, they don't speak, they don't tell a story, they don't contribute to that story we're trying to tell about ourselves. And then the second, which is very definable, is scale. And I've listed a great example here of what I think in terms of current examples of what we have in the city of Stuart. You've got the fence in front of the Dunn Building on Osceola Street that's very pedestrian scale. That works well because it really is for the cars who are slow enough to drive into the parking lot or the people who are walking on Osceola Street. It's relatable on a pedestrian level. Whereas the scale of the fencing and the public art that's in front of the Hampton Inn on US 1, just north of the bridge, you barely even notice it when you're zipping on by because it's not at drive-by scale. So that's just a good example of things to look at when we're looking at, when we review the public art programs. I'm going to do a little bit of a survey of some existing public art. This was probably one of our very first pieces of public art, which is Lady Abundance in the Circle. There's a long history about her. I'm not going to go into it, but if you don't know it, it's kind of an interesting story about our community. She was hidden away for many years and finally brought into the light in Haney Circle. We love art in circles. We've got, again, from a practical point of view, part of what putting art in a traffic circle does is slow the traffic down because there's something visual there to look at. So there is actually a purpose beyond making, a photo opportunity for people in front of the sailfish. Years ago, 20 years ago, hard to believe, we did some temporary public art projects in the city of Stewart. This was an independent, privately sponsored temporary public art trail that you went all the way through the city. It got people moving through the city. It was a lot of fun. By the way, Seward Johnson is a Jupiter Island resident, part of the Johnson & Johnson family. We've done community-driven public art programs. There's still some turtles on parade around. That was a lot of fun. Chicago did cows, Saratoga Springs, New York did horses. You've seen it. And again, great for community engagement. Years ago, when Kim Delaney was in the city's development department, we worked on some transportation-related grants and were able to do several murals. It was sort of the beginning of Stewart's mural program. Two remain for a variety of reasons. The other two don't. But this one here on the 555 building, and then the one out here on Flagler that Maureen Fulgenzi did. This is your current ordinance and standards for work of art in the public art program. And feel free to interrupt me, but I'm just going to keep going, but happy to take questions along the way. When I was re-looking at these, it seems to me that about half of them are pretty cut and dry. You know whether it meets the standard or it doesn't meet the standard. The other half of them are extremely subjective and subject to your personal opinion, experience, and own interpretation of things. I'm gonna address some of the subjective standards as we go and show some examples of good public art, but we can come back and revisit these as Pinal said. I think that this particular standard is one of the more difficult ones because there's nothing here that is definitive in nature. I think that in practice, what cultural diversity has looked like is less about who we are as a community, as a people or a race or anything like that, and the really, really broadest definition of culture, which begins to address what I've already talked about, is what do we as the city of Stewart and the residents of city of Stewart think about and care about and want others to know what we care about. It is hard to interpret because you are going to have a different interpretation than Nick's going to have. There's just no good way around that. And like I already said, environment has been our number one subject matter in public art, with very few selections of work that come off of that particular mark. This is, and I'm gingerly approaching this, but I'm going to. It really is part of the difference of having a public art program versus a privately driven public art program. The developers who are selecting these pieces know that they're reflecting something on their properties and their commercial properties, and so they want them to be not controversial at all, if possible, and they want it to be something they feel like their customers and visitors and the people who are going to be accessing their sites can agree on. And again, the number one thing we can all agree on is we care about our sea life and our waterways and our environment. So I think that's what drives that. When you have a public program and a broader selection, and the artworks are placed on public lands or places where people are. It's one of the big changes we made in the county's public art program is instead of, in the early days, if the jail was doing a capital project, the jail got the public art at the jail site. And we really kind of argued against doing that for the long term because public art should be places where people are. And there are people at the jail, don't get me wrong, but
I'm not there.
but, you know, your first priority should be places like public parks, libraries, where it's really actively, the community is actively engaging and visiting those sites.
The taxpayers are.
The taxpayers, yeah, that's exactly. So scale. Scale is, I think, again, as I already said, one of the biggest places where you can go wrong in public art. These are two examples of automotive scale. The one on the left, they're actually kayaks built into a sculpture in Bend, Oregon. Again, speaks to what Bend believes they are as a community and encouraging outdoor activity and exploring nature. The one on the right is a piece that was actually done by a now deceased but Martin County artist in front of a project in Palm Beach Gardens. Again, you can see these from the road, you know exactly what you're getting. This is kind of a combination of automotive scale and walking scale because it is a footbridge as well as a drive-by bridge. Some of the more fun public art projects, in my opinion, are not the big sculptural elements, but the things that you kind of stumble across and find along the way. This project I love. So the red line on La Ligne is where this path goes, and then all the clear bricks are the path throughout this neighborhood or community. And very subtle, but really kind of cool. Again, walking scale is a great, especially in a downtown like the city of Stuart, and all your projects are CRA projects. This one community did steps to dances, so they encouraged people to dance down their street. And then that's just a nice tile mosaic in the sidewalk. These are very appropriate things that we're already doing, like the mosaic program in the Creek District. These are some great examples of road art and wayfinding. Again, defining communities, defining neighborhoods through the use of public art. This would be more likely used if a private developer put money into the city's trust fund because the private developer isn't going to have the ability to put this really in their proposal. Sound sculpture, touch scale, things to encourage people to engage with the art. Love these, and they can be from functional, like the water fountains, or the big, huge, pipe organ. The use of terrazzo floors and things like railings, typically, again, are more for public art versus private-driven public art. But something like a railing on an apartment building, the railings could be designed to be part of, the balcony railings could be designed to be part of a public art presentation, theoretically. But I love the terrazzo floor, so I have to include that. And I think this slide here is a reminder that public art does not always have to just be art. It's just to be enjoyed. It can be functional too. The bench in the bottom center is actually one of the benches that's up in Rio that the county has done. but they were inspired by local educational school programs, made the designs, and then a local artist turned them in mosaics on the back of the bench. The fence in the middle is out at the House of Refuge, but fences, bike racks, light poles, all these things can become a part of a public art installation. And again, here, we're improving aesthetics with these things. You take that really ugly sound wall on the left, and you add color, and maybe it's not so bad. And then the same thing for the chain link, and I think about the long expansive chain link along MLK in the city of Stewart's maintenance yard. You know, they put flower blossoms along it, and all of a sudden, it's not so terrible to look at. So I've highlighted some codes from some other cities and municipalities. This references in number 1 about the artist's name and CV. Resume is defined in subsection 2, 487, and I've printed it out, although it's the same definition. They've defined public art, or not public art so much as what defines an artist, a professional artist. And I think that's been one of the recent issues that's come up with the public art that was installed at the project Sailfish Cove over here. So I am going to read this. So an artist or professional artist means a practitioner in the arts, generally recognized by critics and peers as a professional possessing serious intent and ability. Indications of a person's status as a professional artist include, but are not limited to, income realized through the sole commission of artwork, frequent or consistent art exhibitions, placement of artwork in public institutions or museums, receipt of honors and awards, and training in the arts. And it kind of goes on from there. But I think it is one of the things that we haven't defined that we need to define. The bio for the artist for the Sailfish Cove project that was purchased in a local gallery. That's all well and good, but there really is no, besides the gallery owner's provided bio of that artist, no other validation that that artist exists outside of a factory somewhere. So, anyway. And I know it's raised some cane around. But Key West, they have both a public and private side of their art and public places. The Keys Council for the Arts actually manages their programs for them. This one from City of Coral Gables, I like, they use that same definition. So it's a pretty standard definition of what a professional artist is. Again, they go further into saying traditional art forms are allowed as well as non-traditional. It talks about what can or can't be done in terms of reproductions, and we address that too. I think it's a limit of 50 total. And then because these are public art projects by private developers, they also address what is or isn't allowable in terms of the trademarks and logos of the business owner of the property. City of Tampa has, I think, good points to make here about the subjectivity. Again, I think this bullet list helps take some of the subjectivity out of it as we're reviewing artwork. Enhanced meaning of place, engaging and inviting people to use a space, bridging scale, promoting identity and the function of the pedestrian. You know, these are more easier to measure than, well, I like it or I don't like it. It's art or it's not art. Berkeley, California uses their public art fund for grants. And Tempe, Arizona also has the option when developers contribute to the fund. They actually have a pretty significant grant program that supports not just the purchase of public art, but also supporting local nonprofit organizations in the community that are doing artistic things. And I think of something like Rocking River Walk and some of the other longtime downtown Stewart arts events, which are done here to draw people in, encourage people to shop and dine in our local restaurants and retail establishments. It is part of the culture, and it does say something about it. So in the broadest sense, those events are part of the public art landscape. And that is all I have. I'm happy to take questions.
Why don't you go first, Mark, since it was your idea to do this?
Okay. First of all, thanks, Nancy. Appreciate the update. And my issues are that some of these art projects that we've started to approve lately are art plus, well, you have to have a railing, and you have to have this, and you have to have that. And I think, we're starting to blur the line between what, the developer, as Nick pointed out, they're paying for this, so they want to get some benefit out of it, right?
Absolutely.
Some of those developers are more altruistic and are more, yeah, I want to do an art project and I like it, but I want people to come to my place to see it. Others are more like, okay, what can I throw up there that I can get some functional use out of in my development that I can call art and have to have pushed towards that purpose? So, what I would like to see is a more broadening, like you and I have talked, Nancy, before about, and I was even looking at doing this, is that instead of putting up a sculpture from Jeffrey Smith, who's a world-renowned artist, there's no question the guy is one of the best in the world, and he's right here, but at the same time, his pockets are relatively full. He doesn't need to sell that next sculpture, right? But then we have people who are trying to get involved in art, and frankly, we lose a lot of artists because they just can't afford to be artists initially. And what I would like to see us do is become an arts community, not just have art in our community. And I would like to see if there's a way that we could encourage some of this money to go to fund chairs for young artists or developing artists. Don't have to be young, just developing artists to have an opportunity to do things. They could provide art to the community at that point, ongoing art. They could, let's say I have a project, I could have a space on there where that artist every month maybe adds a piece, changes something, does something different, so that my art is constantly turning. It's constantly becoming more useful and changing, so it's not stagnant. It's not that sailfish that's going to be there forever, And that was my thing, and that was my question. And the thing I wanted to bring up to this board is, is there a way that we could become an arts community instead of just a community with art? That's, I guess, what I'm looking at.
It's a rather esoteric question, but absolutely. And, to become a large-scale public art-focused artist, it takes a long time in your career to get to that point in time. Somebody has to be the first community that buys your art the first time, so that you're helping that artist build their resume, so that
Right.
other cities will consider them. With some of the future plans we have for the historic Stewart High School property and the makerspace and studio spaces, I think that that's moving in that direction of providing places where people can be mentors and you can kind of be a public artist in residence, building that roster of expertise.
Well, then,
Interrupt you.
okay.
Just for a second, so that, I don't know how many of you know, we have an artist guild
We do.
in Martin County, and they're under the auspices of the Arts Council. And I think there are, 90 members or more?
There are, but most of them don't do.
Most of them do
don't-
not make their living at doing art.
In the guild, there is a requirement that they be professional, earning some level of
Level
income
some, but not-
towards, but most of them are doing small, and I don't want to diminish the work at all,
You can't
because
take
that's
a
not what I
painting and
mean.
post it on the side of a.
Correct,
like
that's
a-
where I'm
a
going. It's-
Canvas and polka dot.
But we
post it on the
also
side of it.
have,
But you can have you can have a spot on a building that's blank, or a sidewalk that you hire a chalk artist to do regular chalk art on the sidewalk, and we saw that done here, the chalk art. It was amazing stuff. But that's the kind of thing that's constantly turning over. You know, it's only going to last so long, but there is the opportunity to do that. There's the opportunity to give a blank slate to a young artist and say, this is your property for the next year, make it happen. And I think there's an opportunity to do that. Now, as long as we allow developers to continue to fund the fence that they need, the rail that they need, the whatever they need, they will not do that. So there's got to be some incentive, a reduced price if they do that, or something to get them, to encourage them to do
So
that.
like in Port St. Lucie, they give a $10,000 or $20,000 credit. So if you hire a local artist in Port St. Lucie to meet their public art ordinance, it's only an $80,000 commitment you have to make
Right.
versus a $$100,000 commitment.
So I'll
But
go
sometimes
back.
you still can't find the right person.
Yeah, I'll go back to, I think one of
hard.
the first things we did when I was put on the board was the code used to read that you could pay 1.5% into the city art fund, or you can put 1% on your property. So it's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah, that's a no-brainer, right?
so, so that, like, we just kind of took the 1.5% out and looked at it as 1% on the property. But I think, you know, when we did Avonlea and I said, hey, I got this list of things that I need to do, and one of the things on there is public art. Like, there wasn't really a playbook or a phone, Rolodex. I mean, obviously I reached out to Nancy and she gave me a couple of names, and it was like, it's not really that easy. I ended up going to, who's the guy that does the craft shows and art shows?
Howard
down here?
Allen.
Howard Allen.
So I ended up going to Howard Allen, and, he put me in touch with somebody, and so, Nancy, maybe a sort of baby step to Mark's art tax that he's talking about is, like,
It's not an art tax. It's already there.
here's your art in public places, here's the portfolio of work that's been done to date, and here are the people who we have as approved artists, so you don't get caught up in some of this, like, hey, who is this person, whatever. I mean, making it easy is almost sometimes, more valuable than making it cheap or making it expensive. Like, if you can make it easy for a developer, you're talking 1%, they're probably going to just roll with that. And so there might be an easy,
And
solution. And I think what happens a lot of times, like, if I'm considering public art, I mean, I'm looking at the project that I'm building, and I'm trying to, as Nancy touched on, put something that is going to promote that and not necessarily be controversial or be, abstract or
Avant-garde,
whatever.
yeah.
But I also don't know, like, all of the other public art that's been done. So when I roll in with my sailfish statue that I think is great, like, I may not realize that there's 7 sailfish statues that have been done as public art elsewhere. So if we
but at least you knew it wasn't a marlin.
right, well, we're up in Florida, the Keys of all. So, maybe if we could start keeping kind of an index or a file of, like, hey, here's other, and it might take a little bit of backlog to build it, but, in the future, it would be just something easy to maintain.
Hey, Nick, can I ask you, just from your perspective, if we had flipped that, in other words, if we had said, okay, if you put art on your property, it's 1.5%. If you contribute to this arts community, it's 1%. Do you think that would switch behavior a little bit?
I think for me, it wouldn't have, because, I mean, like, I took pride in the project and appreciated
Right.
it. So even if it cost me an extra couple bucks, like, I would see the benefit of it in the end, being, especially up there at Avonlea, where, like, if I give you guys a bunch of money, I know it's not going to get put up there. Like, it's going to go somewhere down here. So,
It's going to go on public land because that's,
yeah, and I think it all becomes a little bit relative to, the specific project. But to answer your question, I don't know at what price I just write the check versus, add it to my property.
And I don't know that it has to go, I mean, I understand what you're saying, but it doesn't have to go on public property. It
No.
could still be on your property, but it could be done through an artist instead of the artwork itself, you know what I mean? You could
Side-
hire somebody to do it.
Sidebar question before it pops out of my brain. Pinal, was there ever a public art project for the 69 units built up there at Avonlea, the Tim Hernandez stuff?
I have not seen any public art proposal yet. Have you? No.
I mean, I'm pretty sure that's a condition of
Talking about the
development.
Yeah.
preserve at Avonlea?
Well, the preserve has it, because we did those townhomes, but the ones on the east side of, or the west
Right.
side of Green River Parkway, you know, would have had to do a public art project as well.
That would be required prior to CO of the building,
So,
so.
it did CO, didn't it?
Yeah, there's people
Yeah,
living
so
there.
we'll have to check because that was.
Okay, so-
Not to get
previous-
anybody in trouble here,
Oh,
but
come on, Nick.
It's,
I think there's a compliance issue too. Like there have been a couple projects when I was researching for Creekside Hotel. I found out that Fruits and Roots Plaza didn't have their public art either. So I think there's been, some missed opportunities in the city.
well, and I know, like, as a developer, the timing of it gets a little bit wonky, right? Like, you're getting approved for all of this stuff, and I hesitate to say, like, hey, let's hold up a land development permit on this, but, and then, that's just passing the buck further and further, because are you really gonna tell a guy, like, oh, no, you don't have your public art done, so we're gonna hold your CO, but
Yes,
No, you can't do that.
I think,
yes, you can.
But you can make it that he has to provide what his public art will be.
I think it might be within 30 days of receiving your land development permit or receiving your building permits or whatever it is, like, you have to submit a public art requirement, and if you're not, we're gonna hold all inspections or something that doesn't catch you in that gap where you're,
Start paying your mortgage, but we can't let you.
right. So, I mean, I think it just needs some attention, and then, to Mark's point, if there's a list of, 10 people that are local folks, like, that would just make life a lot easier, for this 1% to be affected and to really remain local versus, developer picking up his phone book or, just hitting the Rolodex,
And I think local is a little bit of a subjective term,
Yeah.
because, we're a small enough community, we're not gonna have experts in every particular medium, and so, local's kind of a regional.
Yeah, and I'm not
reach.
saying like it rules out them, like someone from the outside, but I
Nope.
think it just gives us a little bit of what Mark's talking about in like hey, like, we're an arts community, but when I'm a developer and I come in and I say, hey, where do I go for public art? It's like, I don't know, talk to Nancy, but if there was like an actual, these are all the past projects, this is a little, like, that PowerPoint right there is a great starter to, like, hey, this is what we're looking for, so.
Yeah.
Well, and
We
you
can
have the
certainly
women,
do
you have
that.
women in the arts.
We got all these people that.
Well, but I was just going to mention, you got Women in the Arts, which was a very successful program that worked under the Arts Council in terms of every year getting together and funding that and doing that. So we have the mechanism in place to kind of do some of these things, I think. But anyway, I'm sorry.
Bonnie, go ahead.
Thank you. I do think it's worth exploring what Mark's talking about, flipping that incentive, because there are some awesome developers who do really care about what goes on their site and they want to invest, but there are some that this is just checking a box for them. It's the last step to get approval, and I think where that gets dangerous is we end up with a lot of object-oriented art instead of spatially and place-oriented art. And that's how you end up with sailfish plopped on the side of a site. And
Agreed.
honestly, we've got to figure out how to get away from that. I think if we're talking about maybe lists of people, I think we can talk about preferences for types of art, because I think we're good on sculptures for a while. I think we could talk about the murals, the in-the-ground art, the above-the-head art, things that you're experiencing in a different way than what we're seeing right now. So figuring out how to provide that language would be really helpful. And then I get the idea of the defining what an artist is, but I think that also could be dangerous, because maybe there is just some really young, creative 18-year-old who's got brilliant ideas, and they're thinking really outside of the box, and they lose that opportunity when we talk
And I
about the
think
CV
part
that
of
they
the,
need to
the
have.
the standard language, and, and I've often quoted this in our review of some of the projects, and I think specifically of the murals that we did in East Stewart on the Veterans Building. You don't have, it doesn't have to check every single box on every single standard. It needs to address the majority of them, and you have that sort of flexibility to say, this artist doesn't have this huge repertoire of doing murals, or like when we approved the Vitale mural, I mean, he was a college kid, so how long is his resume going to be at that point in time? And we have the ability to say, yeah, but he's proven out that this is gonna work, and so we can do it.
Okay.
And I think that is an important component of it, is that flexibility in looking at it. 'Cause
Well, I think
otherwise-
that's the role that you play, Nancy. I mean, we're at some level putting our faith in you the same way that we put our faith in staff and, various, other agencies of the city to review things.
Ron, do you have anything else?
No, I think that's,
Andy?
Can I just clarify
sure.
regarding the percentage that the developer has to contribute? It's actually 1%. They could either do 1% of vertical construction cost, or they can contribute 1%.
So it is
So
already
it's 1% either, yeah. And sometimes they don't want to go through the public hearing process or looking for artists, so they might just contribute, but so far we haven't
I
had.
have yet to see.
We have not
that
seen
in
any
a long
contributions
time.
so far.
Andy?
Well, I used to be a developer in my previous life.
Well,
No,
I can't help that, buddy.
Now I manage 200 realtors, quite a diverse transition. But, so I come from Indianapolis, Indiana. I born and raised a Hoosier and moved down here about 10 months ago, so this is kind of a great opportunity for me. I've been involved in the community up there as a developer, and we built a really strong public-private partnership alongside with the arts community, and it was very effective. Particularly in the transformation of the downtown Indianapolis community. And so if I can share any thoughts or ideas over time with you, I'd love to do that. I mean, it was a very model city, I would say. The urban core of Indianapolis was modeled and envied by a lot of cities around the country. But I think that the strength of what happened in Indianapolis over a 30-year period was really built around a public-private partnership, and then the arts community became really a foundation of that, and you had some corporate leaders that really took the lead on driving that agenda rather than the government, and I thought that was really effective. So, there might be some opportunities with that.
Absolutely. I'd love to talk to you more about that. And it is why we exist. The Economic Council of Martin County said, we need to have an arts community that grows over time. Before Ted was there,
you
before
write
I
that?
was there. No, that was
okay.
before both of us worked for either organization. But the folks like Peter Cummings and Erling Spear that were developing Mariner Sands and Willoughby and Piper's Landing and Harbor Ridge and all of those communities back then, they knew they needed to sell homes, and if they wanted to sell homes, they needed an arts environment that would attract people to buy those homes. And so, but we're at that next phase of what that looks like. So I would love to talk to you more about that.
One follow-up question to that, how much in Stewart do you have community development corps, nonprofit, neighborhood-based community development corporations? Are they partnering with, does that exist down here? Okay. Because that was another way that we, community development corporations were really nonprofits that were in the business of co-developing a project with a developer in some instances, and that was a
I'm going to ask that
driver.
you hold that
Yeah,
for a while, because I want to get through this.
sure. Yeah, no worries. Nope, that's all I had.
Frank?
I thought of you artsy folks on Saturday, this past Saturday morning. I left before sunrise to get up to Vero Beach by 8 o'clock or so, and I was on Doug Smith Highway, north of Jensen Beach Boulevard and south of Midway, about halfway. And I looked to the east and I go, oh my God. So I actually pulled over and got lucky. It was the right place, right time, and I got a picture of unbelievable stuff. And I was reminded why I really could care less about human art. It all seems so trivial when you see stuff like that. Okay, that's my opinion. Okay, let's get right to, again, here we go again. We pull up number 8, the original page that had the guidelines, there's like, and go straight to number 8 again. On the original page, it's here. Number 8. Is it still number 8?
Yep.
Cultural diversity or something? Okay. So, since I've been on this board, I don't know if it's been 2 or 3, but nobody checks that box. And they flat out tell you, no, we couldn't check that box. So, why are we going to keep that in the code?
What,
I saw some earlier language, and Pinal had never seen it before, that actually had the word natural there, not cultural.
I think part of it too is, like, we don't have, because, I mean, if you look at, like, the
Is it-
drawing on the mural on the prescription shop, if you look at some of the, not, maybe not the stuff that comes together, comes forward with, a new development project, but.
Is it my fault for seeing that word diversity and just thinking race? Am I just misreading it?
I think that's the most narrow definition of it, and that we can
Pretty
choose to
narrow,
interpret
Frank,
it
because you
a
and I-
pretty wider.
Have completely different cultural affinities. And I bet you never ate an artichoke sandwich.
Tom's art's probably different.
Artichokes.
No, no, no.
No, I haven't.
I mean, our culture is different, like your culture and mine, because of the way, where, and
Well,
what.
But that led us,
But I think that speaks.
that led us to every art we've had so far as a fish.
I think
That led us to
speaks
that.
to like how do, like, I don't disagree with you, Frank, if we look at the, last two,
Right. Yeah.
hearings, like, they've been sailfish statues, I think.
Right.
So,
Well, we had a lighthouse at one point, but,
what's that?
I said we had a lighthouse at one point,
Yeah,
but
but
We
that
did, but
went away.
we went away.
All right,
I
enough.
mean, the lighthouse I thought was cool, but nonetheless, that was my point in, like, creating an index of past projects, is that, like, once a year, we can look at it and be like, hey, were we culturally diverse this year, or did we just approve a bunch more sailfish statues?
Right.
And I think that's
And
what
then-
that means, correct?
Yeah, to me, it's the most broad interpretation of culture. It's who we are as a City of Stuart residents,
Not
as a
whether we're-
culture, not whether we're black,
Green,
white.
yellow.
Right.
Right.
Okay, very good, thank you. Okay, so the only thing that made a lot of sense to me, Mark, was that was excellent. I think we should promote the functional art, because I'm not an artsy guy, but when I see a park bench that looks like, man, that was well done, and some people wouldn't even view it as art. It's just so subtle, but it's just not just a plain old bench either.
yeah.
I like that. The functional art I think is a good thing. All right, that's all I have. Thank you.
Well, you want to say something?
I was just gonna say, we will, not in the next couple of months, because it's our busiest couple of months of the year, but, really looking back over the projects and coming up with that catalog, I think it's a great idea. I kind of have a working list of
Right.
artists, and I think most of we have an artist registry online on our website. The Guild has a really great list of artists, but again, not all of them are public artists. So culling that down and making it manageable for a private developer, I think, is really important. And, the ones I appreciate, we come and we talk about what they're looking for, and I don't just give them the roster. I try to help narrow it down to something that they're looking for. And I mean, Nick, when we met,
Yeah.
what you were looking for, nobody here locally did. So,
Yeah.
you had to look farther afield.
So, I believe in public art, I believe in private public art, and I believe in public art, as some of you may know, and I think Nancy knows, and she's been to my house, she knows we have art all over, and that's great. But I'm going to say my biggest peeve with our art program, public art program, is when it's inside someone's lobby, or we approve something and it's inside where the public doesn't see it. I think if you're going to have public art, it has to be where the public is, not in a lobby, not in your own private courtyard. And I think we have approved in the past a couple of artworks that the public never sees. TC3 is one of those examples. You have to go inside to look at that piece of art.
You
can kind of catch a glimpse if you know you're looking for it when you drive by.
Well, and if you go, I believe the public art for the building that has Sally and Pepe is inside their lobby, correct, Mark?
I
think
don't
so,
even
yeah.
remember that having an
Yeah.
art.
That was 2005, so.
It was before,
That would be for the overall building. Civitas would have
Back in
public
05
art,
or it's-
not Pepe and Sally.
Yeah, but it's inside the lobby. I think Mark knows what I'm talking about. And it's beautiful, but you got to go inside the lobby to look at it, so.
and there's a lock on it. You can't just
Yeah, the
open
lobby's
that
locked.
door.
Yes. And if there's, so,
But if you want the code, oh, no, never mind.
so if there is one thing to me, if we're going to have public art, it needs to be public.
I agree.
And so that was that would
I
be
think
my
that's
only
been-
add-on.
I mean, the TC3 one maybe aside, I'm not familiar with that one, but I think that's been I know like when we talked, I think it was already, you know, in my mind that it had to be,
Well,
you know.
you weren't on the board yet, but it was approved by this board, so I was on the
Okay.
board, so it's within the last 6 years.
Gotcha.
So anyways, that would be my only. So what is our next step, Pinell, with this?
So are you looking for any amendments to the public art code section? Some of the things I heard is maybe define professional artists, and maybe provide some sort of incentives if they use local artists, promote functional art, maybe revise our code to specify that this public art should be outside, not inside a building. Those are some of the comments I heard and could be incorporated as part of an overall LDC amendments that will happen sometime soon.
Well, can I make a suggestion?
Sure.
That within the next month or so, that if we wanted, what do we want to change? If we can communicate that with Pinell, because we can't talk outside this meeting, then she can bring back to this board, here's the changes I heard from the CRB. Let's discuss them, and then we can have a discussion on those proposed changes. Is that
And
all right?
and it would be good to talk to Nancy, too.
Yeah, but I mean, Pinell's the one that's got to put it all
Right,
together.
right.
To bring it back.
So
And
I
this is
will-
as we know, this is not like a short process. This is going to be 6 months, a year to get this all done. 'cause
But I-
that's-
Do we want
I
to break
think it
that
can have
into
a significant
short-term and
impact.
long-term objectives?
I don't know if, I think if we're going to change a code, we only want to, try to recommend
Right,
changes
but I think,
once.
I think like, we could tell Pinal, like, hey, ask the art council to put together an index of our past public art and, put together, like, go to that list of 90 folks and see who wants to sign
and
up.
that wouldn't
to
need a
be
change.
And so that wouldn't be a change, but
Right.
that might be,
Yeah,
a
good idea.
couple months, Nancy, whatever.
Right.
But then, is the change to the code, something more in the spirit of what Mark's talking about, which might be fairly long-term and, changing or defining cultural diversity and defining what an artist is, I think those are relatively, easy changes to the code.
So if that's what is okay with everybody, that's the way we'll proceed so that there's some clarity for
So
staff.
you'll send me specific amendments that
Besides
you're
what we
looking?
talked about today.
Okay.
I'm sure people will think about this a little bit and send you, and then you'll have something to put together. and-
Yeah, I'll have a bullet points of the things I've heard, and then
Right.
we can discuss each one.
So, go ahead, Mark.
Well, I was just going to say, Mr. Chair, I thank you for bringing this up. It's something that's been of interest to me for the last 10 years, and I appreciate that you are allowing us to discuss this, because I think it's really significant for the community.
Well, thank you, but I'm not allowing you to discuss it. I think this board needs to discuss things
Well,
that are
but-
important to it, so that when people do come before us, we can speak to them with some sort of what we believe is the right path to go. Is there anything else? Okay, did you want to do anything else with the staff update or anything, Pinell?
I just recently updated the East Stewart Historic Advisory Committee. We received CDBG grant to acquire and reconstruct the Willie Gary property on MLK. And we are planning to close on that property this Friday. So that's really exciting, and we'll go out for RFP to do new construction on that site for Job Training Center. We are hoping to partner with Project Lift to provide the service once it's constructed. So we'll be doing an interlocal or some sort of lease agreement with Project Lift. So those are some of the things we're working on.
Okay. Having had lunch with him today, I know he's looking forward to doing that.
Yeah, okay, good, yeah.
Anything else? Seeing none, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.